Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined as always by my co-host with lipstick this morning, Attorney Sonia Madison.
Where are you calling out my makeup?
I don't know. This is a new color I've seen on you. I haven't seen this color on you before. It sort of like took me back a little bit. And so,
Yeah, switching up a little bit.
but
Well,
but let me just say this out. I think you are a beautifully gorgeous woman.
let me make sure to put that on a meme on repeat.
Yes, mostly on the outside. Mostly on the outside. The inside, we're still working on that piece. What you got? What you rooting for?
What do you mean, what am I rooting for?
Your t-shirt says rooting.
Oh, for everyone black.
Oh, Jesus, here we go. Here we go, y'all rooting for it. What about the people that aren't black? Are you rooting for them too? Some of them.
You the one that's starting trouble.
It's good trouble. So what does that mean? Rooting for everyone black. Let's talk about that for a minute. Let me think about that.
I'm rooting for black people. That's what it means. I was gonna say, did you enjoy hearing about Donald Trump's sexual escapades with an adult film star this past
I
week?
think I think they should have gotten more detail. I'm just kidding. Whatever, it's interesting that they had this. I was quite surprised. Well, not surprised. I understand why the attorneys actually, for the defense, filed for a motion to to not what do you call it, a mistrial, move for a mistrial, and mainly because they said they thought some of the detail of the testimony of Stormy Douglas, especially some of the salacious parts of it, was prejudicial. And I liked what the judge came back and said, which, to me, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know about legal arguments, but it sounds very reasonable. And he said that because Donald Trump has denied that it has actually existed ever before, then the prosecution needed to provide some level of detail about the encounter so that the jury can then make their determination about who they deem to be more credible. And that was a making of his own, was that by him claiming that it didn't happen, he um, then brought or invited that line of questioning from the prosecution. Maybe he should have just admitted from the beginning and stipulated to the fact that, hey, yeah, we had a one-time affair, blah blah blah, and we moved on.
Or he had sexual relations with this woman, right?
Some kind of relations. Briefly, I'm told. So briefly.
But yeah, I mean they have been, and this case really is going to be he said she said. And
Mhm.
so it is gonna the jury is ultimately gonna have to decide who do they believe more, Stormy or Donald Trump. And so from
Or
that perspective,
Michael, make it Michael
oh,
Cohen.
yes,
That's what it really boils down to.
well, I mean, all of it, because if you've got Stormy Daniels, if you've got her saying the same story as Michael Cohen, who is allegedly saying the same story that Stormy Daniels' attorney said happened, if everyone is saying the same story and only Donald Trump is saying a different story, then again, to what you talked about earlier, what the judge is pointing out, it's going to be a credibility issue. Who do you believe more?
Yeah, well, we can believe some of the documents, but unfortunately, I think Donald Trump is smarter than I think people give him credit for. He really does. He really does have that little gangster mentality
How we
type of
define it?
mobster.
I mean,
Mobster.
define it smart. Smart means you have the ability to exercise your privilege to get what you want. Okay, yes, let's throw him in that smart. But if smart means that you have the intellectual capacity to make patterns or to make creations or to actually be self-sufficient, to actually be a self-made millionaire, I'm not putting Donald Trump in that category.
You can be diabolical and smart. So or diabolically smart.
Yes, but I mean, I'm just saying the fact that Donald Trump came into this world privileged is what gives him a
Yeah.
lot of the leeway, not so much that he has the intellectual capacity to have moved his way into the circle to be a self-made millionaire.
But the issue is how he has protected himself, how he has shielded himself for years, has not texted or emailed and it's very careful, as Michael Cohen said before, to tell you what he wants done without actually telling you, so that he has some plausible deniability. He knows precisely what to say, how to say it, when to say it, in order to, I think, get the response that he wants. And I think it's very manipulative, but it's ingenious. It's kind of a genius type manipulation that you can actually motivate these people to do your bidding without actually explicitly telling them, and without getting your hands dirty or implicating yourself for future
Yeah, well,
prosecution.
and I'm not disputing that. I guess I dispute the manner by which he's able to do that. I think you're giving him the manner by which he's smart enough to figure out how to manipulate everyone. And I'm saying, no, that was his privilege of having money and coming into this world the manner in which he came into it. That is what people are responding to, not so much his intellectual prowess.
Yeah. Well, they say money is a shade. So the scripture says money is a shade. So right now it's offering him a whole lot of protection. Even Alan Weisselberg. So the question is why are they bringing Alan Weisselberg would be the person who knows the most and would be seem to be the most critical witness in this case, because he's the one who is basically recording and responsible for, I guess, I don't know if he was his comptroller or whatever, his accountant. Um, but he's got a lot of information, but the prosecution doesn't plan to call him. And the prosecution couldn't get him to cooperate with them or to flip on him. And so um, that can pose a problem. And I imagine that the defense at some point can say, of all the people that the prosecution didn't call, Alan Reisenberger is one of them. Why would they not call him? Because they know that he would be the one who would dispel their case. I guess the prosecution in their closing argument
I
say
was gonna
the
say,
defense had every opportunity to call him
right.
as well.
I was gonna say, I don't know if that's a good strategic move on the defense to pull that because they could also bring him in, dispel the whole prosecution's case.
But they don't have to.
Gonna
But
be
the burden is on the prosecution, though.
Yeah, the show beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm not disputing that, but nonetheless, the defense will still then feel like they have the burden to dispute any type of reasonable inquiry that the prosecution is making. And so, if one of their reasonable inquiries is not only did you have sex with this person, but you also used your business funds to pay her off, and they seeped into campaign finance funds, and so then either the defense says, hey, let's bring in our accountant so we can show that you did not actually commingle funds, or they don't for whatever reason. But nonetheless, I still think the prosecution is very much showing through, again, Michael Cohen, through Stormy Daniels, through David Pecker, through so many people that, yes, he was using inappropriate funds to pay off people. And so, again, the defense could bring that argument as well. But I mean, I just think the defense strategy really is about making this a political scene.
Yeah. But why not call Alan Weisselberg? Weisselberg? Why not?
I mean, again, it's hard for me as the attorney to speak on someone's strategy because
Yeah.
they know more information than I do.
Yeah, this is always true. This is true. I mean, we can always speculate, but the reality is that if the prosecution thought that his testimony would be helpful for their case, they would undoubtedly have called him there. The defense can call him in order to help prove Donald Trump's innocence, but the burden is not on them to prove his innocence. All their burden is to create reasonable doubt. And if they don't call Alan Weisselberg, I think is what his name is. I keep saying it wrong, I think. But if they don't call him as a defense witness, they don't have to, because it leaves open the question is, let's create reasonable doubt. And the reasonable doubt is to say prosecution could have and should have, if their case was ironclad like they say that it is, but they didn't. And I can understand why the defense might not want to call him, because if the defense calls him, then um, probably some of the other what do they call it? The severance package that he got, $2 million hush money that Allen got to go to jail for Donald Trump, $2 million or whatever, that comes into question. I think even the prosecution was asking this past week to have the judge allow that information into some of the testimony, but I don't think he's going to permit that unless they're going to call him as a witness. Why would you want to be able to submit that they paid him $2 million to excuse me, as a severance package.
But also keep in mind, it's different when you have a witness that you know is going to work for you. It's also different when you have a witness that even if you know that they have information that would be helpful to your case, you also know that they also have information or they're the type of witness that could also hurt your case. And so, I mean, I don't know if saying, well, I mean, if you know this person is going to help your case, you should put them on. Well, not necessarily, not if you know that this may be a hostile witness, or if not if you know that this witness may also bring out other information that may not be as helpful or may be distracting to the case. And so, I mean, of course, it'll be up to the prosecution to make sure that the jury understands this, but I don't think you should take as much stock into someone not testifying, particularly if that person also could incriminate themselves.
Mhm. That's true. Well,
Yeah,
he's already locked up, so I don't know if he's going to incriminate himself even more.
but he
So
could still be like, but I'm not going to go against Donald Trump. And so he could still get up there and say, well, I'll plead the fifth, or I'm still not going to help you, or talk about how great Donald Trump is. And then again, becomes a distraction.
yeah, well, these are matters that are left up to judges and litigative attorneys to actually figure that out, because it's all interesting. I'm still just intrigued sometimes how the law actually works, just because it doesn't really. It's impossible for it to seek truth, but it's the best possible system that we
I
have.
don't know if the goal is truth as it is just justice.
Mm.
I don't know if
But
the goal is truth as it is just justice.
yeah,
And
but can you have justice without truth?
can, because there will be often times where you're not going to know how that person died, but yet you feel justice was served because you got the person that did it. I mean, so you may not know the full truth of the story. But that's again where you have your 12 jurors or however many jurors, because it could be different, that makes that decision, a jury of your peers. But no, I don't know if you'll always know the truth, but you may feel like you've got justice.
Yeah, there have been a lot of people who felt like they got justice before with the wrong conviction. And so, justice doesn't always equal truth at some point. So,
Perhaps to your point, if you have the truth, perhaps justice will come along. But if you don't have the truth, that doesn't mean you don't get justice or you can't
yeah.
get.
And
Because again, there are also people that have been found not guilty, and we can call that justice.
yeah.
Even though you still don't know the
OJ,
story.
OJ,
I know, right? He's a, and because I will still say I still don't know the truth of that story. I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, he did it." I don't know
right.
that.
I don't know. And so my whole position a lot of times is that we never know the truth. The truth just can't be known from some of us until the end comes, until God reveals it, with uncertainty. And guess what? People will they'll then question whether or not it's really true. I've got friends who look at mountain of evidence. I presented to them the data about Donald Trump's overestimation of the values of his properties. I think he had one 12-unit apartment or something like that in 2010 got appraised at $750,000. But in 2011 and 2012, he reported on his financial statements to the bank that those things were worth 20 and 30, $50 million. You're like, what are you talking about? A year ago, you got an appraisal which uses market value and said it was worth $750,000. This was an independent bank ordered appraisal. And a year later, you say it was worth $30 million. Where do you get that from? And I get the reason for that is that you want to inflate your credit worthiness so that you get better rates on a loan. This is what's the Manhattan DA ruling against him. But no matter how much you actually present evidence and data to people, they will still say that's not true. That's made up. You're just relying on information that somebody else told you. And that's a response that we can get throughout eternity until God himself says it. And I think when God himself says it, there will still be people who would doubt, hey, did God really say? That's what the Satan said in the garden. Did God really say this? And so
Right.
truth can never really be known, I don't think. And so truth has to only be relied upon or believed, and its truth becomes only what you deem to be true from a source that you deem to be credible.
I mean, I do agree truth is subjective and relative to the person beholding it. I don't know if I would say will never be known. I guess it depends on your faith. I mean, if you believe that Jesus is truth, well, you have the capacity to know and understand and have your own relationship with Jesus. But on the flip side, if you decide, well, no, that's the Christian's truth, then
There
I,
it is.
no, right.
Yes. So it all boils down to belief. And I think right now we have to come to the point where we really start realizing that the only reason why we believe anything is because we have faith in that thing. And whether you call that a religion, whether you call it the success aerodynamics, you have some faith in aerodynamics every time you get on a plane. You have faith in a whole bunch of things in architecture. When you lay down at night, you got faith, you have a belief in all of these things that they will be and or are as represented. And so I don't know. I mean, seeking after truth anymore, it's become less of an issue for me. It's now it's
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
just peace.
now I'm after the truth, and the only truth that I have is Jesus. That's why he said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." And so that's the only truth now that I can actually rely on. So no, I don't make definitive comments and declarations about almost anything now because I'm like, yeah, this one small piece of information that you could be missing that changes your whole interpretation of it.
I'm gonna make sure that that's also a meme that I hit rewind and, and play on. But yeah, this is kind of transitioning to our topic. But oftentimes, one of the things you said is that people will not understand that whatever the truth is when it comes to a criminal trial. And sometimes when you're trying to bring in outside mitigating character stuff, you can't necessarily bring it in during the main trial, but you could perhaps bring it in on sentencing to try to mitigate the sentencing. And so I say the transition is because oftentimes what becomes into that sentencing hearing is, well, my mom didn't do X. Or, my dad wasn't around, and so it was just my mom. And interesting enough, I had a conversation with one of my male friends, and he was saying, I just feel like the Bible in society gives mothers way too much weight, and it doesn't necessarily give fathers or husbands enough weight to either analyze their feelings or to make sure that their feelings are considered in their marriage or in the household, which I, of course, completely disagree with. But nonetheless, since we're here to appreciate mothers, two parts. I mean, one, do you put, because often this happens a lot in psychology, do you really put your trauma, all that on your parents or specifically your mother? And then the second part, of course, do mothers pour more so into the family or into the marriage than fathers?
I think historically that probably has been the case. And it boils down to gender roles. We have these conversations often about gender and gender roles, and I think since the beginning of time, the role of nurturer has always befallen the mother. And I think as time is evolving, more women are saying that I don't need to necessarily conform to the ideologies or the images that society has created for me. And some men are doing the same thing. They're saying, "Hey, I can be just as nurturing as a mother can be, or even more in many cases." And so I don't know. I think that really depends on the person, but I think in general, historically, that responsibility has fallen on the mother. And most of the time, they have done it well.
I agree. And I understand that we're coming into this age where men felt like their voices aren't being heard because I think that's going to be part of the politics is, Oh, well, what about the man's right to choose? It's only the woman that gets to decide to have the baby. The man doesn't get a voice in this. Oh, look at
Why
you.
you say it? Why you say it in a whining voice? Why is it only the mother
Why
gets
did
it?
you agree so quickly?
I'm, listen, I'm agreeing that that's what people say, but I didn't. I'm not saying that I agree that they say it in that tone
Whatever.
that you were
You
using.
couldn't even take your sip. You had to make sure to agree on that point first. But nonetheless, I still and again, I understand that there's algorithms in play, there are people in your circle in play. But the narrative of still the woman being extremely involved when it comes to particularly parenting, um, still to me rings more true. And so when I hear a guy complaining that, hey, it's not enough talk about a man's feelings, I'm kind of like I hear the talk about a man's feelings all the time. I mean, I think Kevin Samuel's whole platform was to talk about male feelings. I'm
One platform. One platform. Okay. Well, thank you, Sonia. That's enough for you all, right?
I'm missing how your feelings are not getting heard. But I also remember the Cosby Show when Bill Cosby's character got upset because he didn't feel like his Father's Day gifts were on the same caliber as the Mother's Day
They
gift.
never are. I mean, think about it. Kids will go to church with their mother on Mother's Day. Mother's Day is always packed, but Father's Day, that sucker is empty. Like, oh, it's just another day,
Whose
another
fault is
Sunday.
that? I
Huh?
mean, whose fault is that?
Kids?
What-
Jeez, the Bible says, honor thy mother and thy father.
Yes.
But
One,
today,
hopefully your father is there to be honored, but
and
then
he's honorable.
right. And then two, is he asking for you to come? Because I
Mm,
mean, again, it's a lot more women in the church than men. And
yeah.
so are the fathers asking for their children to show up in church?
That's true. Well, I don't think that there's any substitute for, as a man, I can never know what it's like to have a child inside of me and to be connected with that child um, day in, day out for 40 weeks, some cases 30 weeks or whatever it is. But there has to be some connection that makes you feel like, hey, I actually carried this child that I can never really understand. And maybe there's a connection to that. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm like, okay, it's time to go. It's time to cut the umbilical cord. And it's easier for me as a man to say I want to cut the umbilical cord than a woman do, because they're like, this is part of me. This was part of me since, from years ago, and never let it go.
Is that your story and you're sticking to
I
it?
don't know. I can't.
Ask my kids to come to church.
Huh?
You're like, I'm not gonna ask them to come down.
I ain't gonna ask my kids to do anything. I'm not gonna put pressure on you to do anything. If you want to be around me, then you're welcome to come around me. If you decide that you don't want to, so be it. Then
You
I'm
gonna be
not
okay
gonna.
with that? If they said, no, we're good not being with you on Father's Day, you're like, okay.
It's another day. It's just another. I mean, here's the deal. I don't think that people should dishonor their parents 364 days a year, and on Mother's Day all of a sudden just say, I'm going to bestow all this other honor on you because today is Mother's Day. It's then performatory. I guess it's more perfunctory at that point for you to try to do it on this particular day. I'd rather you spend the other 365 days a year honoring your mother than to, disrespect her the rest of the year, and then all of a sudden you honor her on Mother's
You're
Day.
like the typical guy that talks about Valentine's Day. Listen, I should be giving you flowers every other day. Don't be looking
Yes.
for Valentine's. But the reality is you're not doing that 364 days a year. You're
Okay, 275. 277. Give me a majority at least.
And the reality is, people, and I know you don't do things for people, but people are going to ask, so what did you get for Mother's Day? Or what did you get for Valentine's Day? Or what did your kids do for Father's Day? And I'd imagine you as a parent would like to say, oh, yeah, they came down and we went to church and, had a great little Father's Day brunch. Unless you just like saying nothing because they decided to make 364 days.
Listen,
that they will call me and make sure that I am doing good.
I will be totally fine with saying that. I totally fine. I don't celebrate very many holidays, and so this is probably why Doris probably gets the short end of the stick, though. But
For me,
because
a
I'm,
little
I'm
one of them.
I'm grateful that she doesn't really make too big of a deal out of those things because throughout the year, I celebrate her I try to at least. She may not feel celebrated every day, but um, but I'm not a big person on the holidays, and it feels disingenuous for me to really make a really big deal out of Mother's Day because I want to honor my mother. Well, I do, but this is not the way that I honor you. I don't view me getting you flowers or candy or something as me honoring you. Me honoring you is how I talk to you and how I interact with you, how I show love for you in other ways. And so that kind of meaningless to me. It was my mother's birthday was yesterday, right? My mother died 8 years ago. And one thing that she said to me that stuck with me after a while, and she said something. She said, I was getting, she was when this was when she was sick, and I had went up to visit her, and it's probably one of the last times that I visited her before she died. And as I was walking out, when I was getting ready to leave and come back, I told her, I said, I love you, Mom. And I was getting ready to leave, and I left. And she called me back to the room and she said, Mark, I called back in, came back in. I didn't know what she was going to say, but she said, they say actions speak louder than words. And I didn't know how to take that. I didn't know if that was provocative or if that was, or was that just informative or what are you saying at some point? It felt a little provocative, to be honest with you. At that point, I said, well, I love you. And then it was time to go. Because it is easy sometimes.
I don't feel it. So
Exactly.
I get
That's the point. That's the point. She's like, I don't feel it. You say that you love me, but I don't feel it. And so I realized from that moment that it's incumbent upon us to be able to show love to that person the way that they receive love and not necessarily just give it to you the way that we feel like it's supposed to happen. So a lot of parents may not necessarily want all the gifts. And I don't think my mother was that. My mother was probably that kind of way as well. She's like, don't give me flowers on Mother's Day and treat me like garbage the rest of the year or something like that.
not that there
She's
should be either or. You can do both.
treat them like garbage and give
No,
flowers.
no, no. You give her flowers and treat them honorably the rest of the
You
year.
can, you can. That's true, and you should. But it's important to realize that you're showing on a regular basis love the way that that person receives love, and not necessarily trying to gender up some type of gifts or something like that to make up for any other deficiencies you might have had throughout the year.
Which you started that well with by saying, "Hey, I'm not a holiday person." And so you're ending that by saying, but it doesn't matter if I'm a holiday person or not. If my wife does want some type of recognition, you should step up and do that. Is that
Absolutely.
I want to make
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
and
if
hopefully your wife isn't getting too much shorter than a stick. Then hopefully
she may not get all the enthusiasm that she wanted to get from something like that, but I will still try to gender up some type of enthusiasm for this day to help you feel like this is important because I know it's important to you.
well, and I think that's sometimes when I hear guys say, I'm not doing that, that's just a commercial holiday. I feel like there's a you're ignoring what does she want? I mean, now if she's saying, hey, I don't want to do it, blah, 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 I'm with you. But if that's not what she's saying, and you're just using that as an excuse not to do anything, or even if you believe it, but you're still neglecting what she wants. I mean,
But isn't the better question is why does she want it? Why do you want this kind of why do you want this type of attention and this
why
type
was
of
Mother's Day brought up?
celebration?
Why was Mother's Day brought up to begin with? I mean, if
To
Mother's
make money.
like
To make money. It was a commercial holiday.
I don't know if you can go to Congress and say I want Mother's Day just to make money. I don't know. I mean,
Listen,
no, I mean,
that's
don't be wrong. I don't doubt the lobbyists will say, hey. whatever the reason is, I need you to support it so that we can make money. But I don't think that that was the reason that was presented before the floor. But nonetheless, I mean, I'm sure your mom would probably have said this. I know my mom says it more than once that they sometimes just don't feel the level of appreciation for all that they do. And as both of us who have been children of parents, and now that you're a parent, I'm sure you could probably say, hey, the amount of stuff I have done for my kids, they could never repay me. So much that they could never repay me. But if there's a holiday in which they can express some type of appreciation, and we know that they're not expressing that same appreciation 364 days out of the year,
Or
then
276. No.
then I'd imagine that your wife would want to at least make sure that that day gets acknowledged, or at least an expression of appreciation for all that she's done that they could never repay her for.
But why? The question is why? Why? Why, yeah, why is this day such an important day for you as a mother? Is it not gratifying enough for you to know that God blessed me with this child and I did the best that I could do to help rear this child? I can look at this child and hopefully see successes in my child rearing.
I'm just say, I'm just surprised you're keeping a straight face. Is that enough for you?
No, to me it's enough for me on Father's Day. On Father's Day, it's enough for me to be able to look at my children grown, accomplished, doing what they want to do, hopefully following after the Lord and doing things that make me proud. More importantly, doing the things that they feel like they're called to do. Um, to me, I look at that and be like, man, okay, that's enough. Congratulations. That's enough reward for me. Now, if my kids aren't doing those, if my kids aren't doing those things,
Well,
then
I mean, the thing that they're
I
doing
might
those,
need something to make me feel good
but
about
I'm
what I
like,
did.
say that they're doing those things, but don't call you on your birthday or don't call you on Father's Day. If you're saying, hey, I'm okay with that because I see them accomplished, then okay, cool. That's cool for you. But I would imagine for some parents, there's still that desire for their child to say thank you. And if they're not saying it again 364, and here's a day in which thank you corporations, you remind us to say thank you.
Right.
You and you choose not to. If
Mhm.
you're telling me you're okay with that, okay. But
I
I
think that actually did happen. I think
would
a
be like,
year or so ago,
say thank you. You know?
I think a year or so ago, I did miss Father's Day when somebody didn't call me. I don't remember who it was, or I think one of my children didn't, you know, acknowledge Father's Day. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And it was weird only because the holiday was so commercialized. And it was like, was I crushed because of it? Like, I can't believe you didn't call me on Father's Day and say Happy
You
Father's
knew
Day.
it was the day.
Huh?
They
Right.
said you knew it was the day.
Yeah.
I
I'm
know you watch TV.
so I can't remember if it was Father's Day or if it was my birthday, one of the two. But in that moment, and probably for about 3 minutes, I probably thought about it. I was like, oh man, that's kind of messed up. And then I thought about it. It's like it's only messed up because everybody else around you is doing it, and just because this person didn't do it on that particular day doesn't mean that they disregard you. And now I know my children don't
It
disregard
also
me in any
doesn't
way.
mean that they actually did disregard you. I mean, you don't know which one it is, right? Because on the one hand, you know that they knew it was today. You know that they were reminded it was today. But you also
Yeah,
know they didn't call you. So, I mean, it could go either way, right?
I'm cool with it. If you call me the next day, if you call me the day before, if you call me a week later, I'm like, hey, Dad, I love you, whatever. I'm good with it. It doesn't matter to me that you missed
So
that
long as you
particular
called.
day.
You're just like, so long as you called at some point.
At some point, yeah, exactly. As long as some point you're showing me the appreciation that you have and the love that you have for the sacrifices I made as your father. I'm not sure that that can fly with mothers though, because my kids
I
can
don't even
go,
think you can fly with fathers. I think that was the whole point of the Father's Day episode by Bill Cosby. And again, that's what I was telling you about the conversation I had with my friend. Because he was on this whole, hey, it's not fair that mothers get way more value than what fathers and husbands get. Of course, I disputed that because I don't think that's true. But I do think that that's conversations that apparently you guys as fathers have.
What conversation?
Oh, Mother's Day, a whole full blown out affair. Father's,
It is.
I'm looking back at a phone call.
I I I think it's that way because mothers demand that a little bit more. And when I say demand, I don't want to say it in a very authoritative way, but I'm saying or require or request, however you would want to find a softer word to do it. But I want to use the word demand because because if you don't do it, there are consequences to it. So demand is probably still an appropriate word for it. If you don't honor your mothers on Mother's Day, not only will that mother shun you for it often, but society shuns you more. If you didn't even honor your mother. I mean, every time you go to if you go to an award show, they're like, "Thank you, mom, love you, mom," that kind of thing. But nobody be like, "Thanks, dad, love you, dad." That
Yeah,
don't
but they
happen.
are often like, what happened to me? Was that just the sperm donor? I mean, dads will
Exactly.
say something. And dads are often, at least from what I hear, they're often like, no, I'm gonna be there for my kid. That's me after the man. I gotta be there for my kid, you can't. And so then again, like you're a human being. Every human being wants the at least acknowledgement that either they're doing something right or that they have a purpose. And so if your kid is pretty much saying, thank you, mother, for all that you have poured into me. And then the Father's Day doesn't call you at all. And then you're saying, I'm cool with that. Because while my wife got the big display, I didn't get anything, but I'm cool with that. I'm calling BS. First of all, you're not cool with that because you've noticed it. But secondly, I mean, I think that's because again, I think women pour more. Like you said, they're nurturers. They're more into that relational, aspect of any type of relationship than men are. And so then yeah, if they're pouring more, they're probably going to get more. When you give, then it comes back at some point. And that
Mm.
isn't to say that the men don't give. I'm sure you guys do give, but that's why I also say that it bothers you that you feel like you're not getting anything in return.
Well, for those guys that are bothered by it, then that's one thing. But just because I observe something, because I notice something, doesn't mean that I'm impacted by it. It means that I'm observant, and I'm like, "Hey, this happened."
But it
Okay,
could mean that you are impacted by it.
it could be.
And so then, but that's what I'm saying. So then acknowledge if you are. And again, that's fine. But then, don't, I mean, to me, then have the conversation because I don't doubt that as a parent, you want to feel as if that all that you have done is acknowledged and appreciated.
So then I go back to the question of why. Because as I said before, and as I mentioned, yes, I did notice it. I was impacted probably for about 3 to 5 minutes. And the reason why is because you have to ask yourself the question, why am I impacted by this? Do you interpret this action to mean that this person doesn't love me? Do you interpret this action? Are you insulted by it because society placed the demand on this person that this person didn't meet at that point? Why are you frustrated by that? And for me, it was like it was neither one of those. It was certainly not because I felt like my kids disrespect me or my kids don't love me or appreciate me. No, I'm like, that's disregarded. And then
You're
it
like, that's
was
me. Of course not.
no, seriously. I know my kids. My kids love me. They listen. They know how to interact
Perhaps
with
they
me.
were sending you a message. Maybe you got the wrong.
But I'm sitting there watching my daughter give my wife some flowers even right now. So
And expect that next month.
yeah, exactly. I guess I better get out and go get me some give her some flowers as well. I can't do that because my son sent her some flowers the other day in the mail. So she's gonna have a whole lot of flowers. I guess I can't do that this weekend. But the point for me is this: hey, yes, you look at it. I think what happens is that we fail to ask ourselves why enough. Why is this important to you? Why are you offended now when it didn't happen the way that you wanted to happen with all of the fanfare and celebration that you wanted to have? What does it mean to you? And for me, when I asked myself that question, I said, well, it's just because society said that this is what they're supposed to do. And I'm not so inclined to be upset because my sons or my daughter didn't comply with what society told them they need to do on this day. I didn't tell them they need to do that. I didn't make that requirement of them. So if they don't live up to that requirement, how can I be upset that they didn't? Now, on the other hand, their parents, their mother may make that requirement of them. My kids don't call me for about 2, 3 weeks, and I'm like, okay, fine, cool, what's up? Well, they'll just text me here or there, and I'm okay with that because I don't require more than that. But if you go a couple weeks without calling your mama, there's going to be some problems at that point. And
Hence
so,
why the mother pours in more.
eh, I don't know what you call pour in more, but if I'll give you that,
How
I'll
are
give you
you
that.
pouring if you're not talking?
Just because you assume that because you're talking to somebody that you're pouring into
But if
them.
you're not talking, you're definitely not pouring.
Not necessarily true. You pour a lot of times by example. You lead by
They
example a
don't
lot of
see
times.
you.
So,
You're
huh?
like, they don't see me. I don't hear from them for 2 weeks. So you're not pouring at all.
Yeah.
And you just hope that they're what the tuning in on the round table every Saturday to hear what you gotta
Yeah,
say.
you better get it. You better get it when you better catch it in the post. But I don't know that. Like I said, I think that's something that is innate within a mother that will say, "Hey, I want to hold on to you. I want to create more of that." I don't know if that's changing, and it might be changing. I do think um, that mothers are becoming, unfortunately, a little bit more detached. And this is not a new thing. I have several. It's not because I have several of my brothers who when they were rearing their children, they actually had custody of them. And at the time, it was almost unheard of for a man to have custody of the child, then because it was always the mother. But there was a period of time when I think women were starting to experience this liberty, or the liberty that men had been experiencing for years. Women's lib, I do think, have had some to some extent a deleterious effect on the family, because now all of a sudden gender roles had been disrupted. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm just saying it is. Anytime you disrupt what has been established for generations and generations and millennia, when you start disrupting that, then you're going to have some negative consequences in it.
Well, I mean, of course, from my perspective, when it comes to the Black family, nothing has much of a detrimental impact than slavery. So, I mean, by the time we're dealing in the 50s and the 60s, our families were already being destroyed and dismantled left, right, up and down. But nonetheless, I mean, I still say if that's one perspective of saying, hey, listen, if you don't want to fall into what society or what this commercial environment is telling you to do, that's fine. But I guess to me, another way of looking at it is so long as you're picking another day or another moment or whatever to make sure you acknowledge your parents.
Or 276 of them.
There are other days.
Yes.
But as you and I know, being adults, life moves at you fast. And so if you're not doing that, which more likely than not that you're not, and it's not again for selfish reasons as it is because life moves so fast. I mean, I was joking with a friend of mine the other day. I feel like sometimes you have to have the spare $200 in your pocket every day for life's expenses that come up.
Wow. You got a lot of life expenses.
Life
$200 a day?
Yeah, just the other day I had my tenant said the AC isn't working. So, you got to get the AC, it's not working. A friend of mine was talking about how she had to fix new tires. So I mean, just life comes with expenses. And so you're may not thinking, hey, listen, have I honored my parents today? And so the fact that this holiday does remind you, and then you choose, to me, if you're intentionally choosing not to say anything, I hope you're doing that because you have been intentional about honoring and those other days.
So let me ask you this question. What do you think we as children owe our mothers?
When you say, oh, I mean,
That's the intentionally said, oh.
I know, I would say, obviously, I don't know if we owe them anything because they did make the choice to have us. It wasn't as if we asked, hey, can I be born? And they said, sure. And now we've got this contractual transaction. Um, but in terms of going back to the Christian look at how God, I mean, been very clear to honor your mother and father. I think by that, the responsibility is to make sure that they are appreciated, respected, and revered.
That's it.
I mean,
You don't owe them to care for them when they're old and feeble and not able to care for themselves, or what? I mean,
saying you owe, because again, that O word is a man-made term. I'm not saying you owe, because even God has been clear. Your best is not good enough.
mhm,
Your best won't get you to heaven. But he does require us to honor them. And so if the interpretation in that is, hey, when they are old and they need care, your honoring is to make sure to care for them, then yes, we are obligated to do that. But that's interpretation. I mean,
yeah.
I would consider that as a responsibility to make sure my parents are good, but I'm not going to say that everyone holds that same value.
Hmm. What am I gonna say? Is we owe our parents! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! And I hope you'll expound on what you believe. And anybody who's viewing right now, let us know what you think that you owe your parents. And the Bible says, "Owe no man nothing but to love him." And so one of the things my mother used to always say, and she used to always quote the Bible and say, "Who is my mother and my brother? Who are they? Those that follow the will of God." And so that comes a whole other question when you have a parent who is of a different faith and a different belief than you are. And I'm curious how my mother would have responded if for whatever reason we did not necessarily have the same faith. And because I might have had a different faith, if my saying, "Hey, I can't communicate with you. I can't associate with you." I know people who are of certain religious faith that says I have to separate myself from the entire family, from other relatives, and for a period of time, they had no interactions with their family because they're saying, "Hey, my faith requires me to do this." And I don't know how parents would respond to something like that, where you say, "I need to disown you at some point because." And at some point, will a parent disown their children? You're like, I just can't, I just have to wipe my hands clean of you. And at some point, you have to get to the point where you say, hey, there's only so much that I can do. There was one thing I asked my mother before, and apparently it stuck with her for decades, and I never really realized what the impact of that was going to be. But I was in my early 20s. I said, it must be difficult to be a mother and to see your child go down a path that that you see is harmful for them, and to realize that they're an adult, but there's nothing that you can do to really steer them from going down that pathway. And probably 20 years after that, she wound up bring that back up to me. She's like, "You have no idea how hard that is to be able to do that." And and I don't know, maybe as a father, I know it's got to be kind of difficult to do it because I watch my children make some decisions. I'm like, that's probably not the best choice that you should do right now. And you interject as much as you can interject, and or as much as you think you should interject, knowing your child and presuming how he or she would respond. But I imagine that seems to like it would be a little bit even more difficult for a mother to do, to say, "Hey, I gotta take my hands off of this thing," because mothers are a little bit,
I
they call
think
them smothers sometimes.
I think they do it easier with their daughters and their sons, for one. I
Mm.
do think it's maybe the reins on the sons from the mothers is a little tighter than the reins from mothers and daughters. But I would also, the whole concept of disown. I don't think any parent well, I shouldn't say because I'm sure some do. I don't think it's right to disown a kid. Now you could say I'm not going to be in the same environment that I disagree with. So I'm going to distance myself from a lifestyle that I don't agree with, or I will distance myself from decisions that you've made. But if that child were to ever come back and say, "Hey, I need help," kind of like the prodigal son, I feel like that's still your kid. Like you still open the door for help. Now, if they don't accept the manner by which you help them, I'm not saying you enable them by helping them by the manner by which they think they should get help. I mean, I don't agree with that at all. But to say that, oh, you're no longer my child, I no longer have a son or daughter, I don't think that that's biblical. I don't
So
think
you
that.
don't do you think that Mrs. Dahmer would have
And
would
he
would have wanted to disown Jeffrey?
She may have wanted to, but I don't think she would have. She may have wanted to. I don't think she would have. But because I watch these documentaries and I do hear the parents say, "Man, but that's my kid." You know, I don't. I mean, I still love them. That's my child.
You
Um,
hear the mother say that.
yeah, you do. You hear the
But you don't hear the father be like, "Look, something wrong with that boy. Something wrong with
I did watch one. I did that, but you're right, number too often. But I did watch one in which the child killed both. Well, he shot both parents, killed the mother. The father made it. And for a while, the father was like, "Nah, I want him in jail, I want him locked up." But his son later apologized, expressed forgiveness, expressed remorse, and he stopped helping at that point. Stopped helping the prosecution. So, I mean, I do think that if even in those situations in which they're harming you or if they've
Mhm.
harmed mass people, if they come with a level of repentance and remorsefulness, I still can't imagine a parent being like, "I don't care, you're shunned."
Well, I think humans are the only are the only animals that respond that way because maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. I'm not a veterinarian, so I really don't know about a lot about animal psychology, but I do know that there are certain species, particularly like in dogs, there's sometimes a mother just won't allow that one child, that one pup to nurse. And they're like, this one probably we actually had a dog like that. And it was a Basenji. The dog doesn't bark or anything like that, but it was rejected by its mother. And the mother probably realized that this dog probably shouldn't survive. So there's something ain't right about that dog. About that pup. Well, you could try to make it
Nobody
survive if
cares.
you want to,
This
but
ain't
this
it.
one ain't mine. But I'm not saying that we as parents should do that at some point, but humans, we have a little bit more compassion than that, and sometimes that compassion is hard for us to let go. And it is probably biblical because the thing the Bible says, again, as my mother would always say, who is my mother, who is my brother. A lot of times we hold on to relationships that are harmful for us, spiritually, emotionally, physically harmful for us, because society tells us this is the way that you're supposed to honor that person. And you can't let that person go, but that person all along is really killing you, and your maintenance of that relationship is killing you. And whether that person is your mother or whether that person is your child, if that relationship is harmful, you have to let that thing go at some point. My belief is this, and you get no judgment from me.
It looks. Yeah, the relationship is the same because again, if the relationship is you enabling your child and your child is not learning it or is taking advantage of you, then yes, that manner of relationship does need to end. But I'm not saying that that means you no longer have a child. No, you have to change the manner of the relationship because you can't move in the way that that was moving. I mean, the same when you talk about abusive partners. I mean, I'm not saying that you divorce them, but I am saying you need to leave the abuse. Now, if that's the only way that you guys can be in a relationship is that you get abused, then okay, fine. Yes, you're going to have to divorce that relationship. But now, if that person changes before you have divorced and you are seeing a change, I just think as people, particularly as Christians, we hold on to that hope that hey, this person can be the person that we can commingle together. And I don't
Mhm.
care even if that's a pastor, a congregation, that's a mother and child, that's a husband and wife. I just feel like when you enter these relationships, you do so with this hope. And that hope doesn't die unless the person is clear that, hey, the only manner by which you can be in a relationship with me is if you are part of a lifestyle that you don't agree with.
Yeah. One of the viewer who actually said before we do owe our parents, that viewer did follow back up and says we owe our parents love and to love them the way that they want to be loved. And I agree with that. And the scripture says, oh man, oh no man, nothing but to love him. And I add that extra part in there to say to love them the way that they feel loved, just like my mother was saying, actions speak louder than words.
Or the way Christ
I don't
loved.
necessarily I believe in that though, by the way. I don't know that I necessarily believe that actions speak louder than words. They might speak louder, but a lot of times they speak less clearly.
I was gonna
because
say, so then you do agree they speak louder. You're just
I
saying sometimes the
I don't
maybe just
I
use.
don't know. I don't know that I necessarily. When people say they speak louder than words, that means it shows it more. Is more effective than words, and I don't believe that because a lot of times actions are misinterpreted. We wound up. You're gonna have a whole lot of action, and people misinterpret what you meant by that action. And until you open your mouth and ask me, what do you mean by that? You don't know exactly what my intention was behind it. I can get you flowers with bad intent. That's an action, right? But you don't know what it really meant. I could have gotten you flowers believing that you were allergic to something. And let me get the ones that I know
And
she
I'll
don't
give
like.
you one action. I'll give you one action. But when it's multiple actions, I'm going to follow the train that no, you did this because you like if you're calling me every day, if you're asking can we hang out, if and bringing me flowers, I think it's safe to say okay, he's clearly showing an interest.
Or he wants something.
Or either way, it's
It's an
the
interest.
right. The action is clearly speaking here, and I need to figure
Mhm.
out okay, what is your end game? But now if it's just one, I'll give you that. But I think oftentimes we say that with the plural actions with the S in the end because the sequence of it all is speaking louder than you just saying I love you. Now you could tell me you love me, but if I'm getting hit or you're never sending me flowers or I'm telling you, hey, I like to go out and hang out and get outside the house, and you're just saying, no, I just want to stay home all day, then that speaks way louder than you just telling me you love me.
Maybe, maybe.
Look at you.
I just don't want I don't want it to get I
Pointing
don't
you a kiss speaks louder than just saying, telling
listen.
you, have a good day, Mark.
I don't think there's an action that could ever express my sentiment better than my words can. And you know, the problem is that people often look at your actions and expect it to mean something, and they misinterpret what your actions mean because this is what if I did this, this is what I would be thinking. Well, no, just because you would think that way doesn't mean that I think that way. And so don't discredit.
Not. If someone
Don't
is showing you something, you need to believe what you see too. I don't want you to not believe what you
I'm
see.
not saying that. I'm not saying that either. But I think we put far too much emphasis on actions, and then we relieve the person of being able to and efficient with using his words. And so you have to learn how to use your words
I'm gonna
and
hold you
couple it
accountable for
to
your
those.
actions. I'm gonna hold
Yeah,
you accountable
I'm
for
gonna
your
hold you accountable for your words too. If you tell me this, then I want to see actions that follow after this that measure up with it. But don't assume. Here's the problem is don't don't interpret an action to be exactly what you think that action is without getting the appropriate accompanying words. You need to be able to couple the actions with the words. Now, when you have words and actions that are congruent, then you got better communication. But when your words and your actions seems incongruent and contradictory, then we need to have some more conversation. We need to have some more words to clarify some things.
I mean, I'm definitely with you. If they're congruent, that is a good sign, green flag. But I will also say if he is saying what you want to hear, or she, and doing complete opposite, I don't think you need to have too many further conversations.
Let me modify that statement here. This is how proverbial Doc would say that. Actions speak louder with words. Then I will go with that one. I will concede with that one. Actions speak louder with words. So this Mother's Day, all of you get out there. You show your show your love, show it with your actions, but couple it with the words that really mean, and share. Don't let your actions speak for you. Use your words to articulate the feelings that you have and the appreciation, the love that you have, the admiration and gratitude that you have for your mothers because ain't nothing like a mother's love.
Yes, especially if you are one of Mark's kids. Now, Father's you don't worry about it. Don't even
Oh,
need to
the
call.
hatred.
Don't need to call. Don't need to stop by.
Listen, if you want to, you're welcome to do that. if but don't feel compelled to do that because
All right,
if
don't feel compelled to call me. No, no.
don't feel compelled because you feel like I'm going to be upset if you don't. I want the love that you feel comfortable giving me. I don't want to demand another type of love from my children. I'm
Hey,
like if
sometimes you do things even if you don't want to do them because you love that would appreciate it. So
well, good. Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. Happy Mother's Day to mine in heaven as well.
yes. Thank you guys so much for commenting and tuning in. You can catch us every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Also, next Saturday, Mark is going to tell us how you can get a dead worm in your brain. I'm still curious as to how that happens. Thank you, RFK Jr. So we'll do a little bit of medical. But in the meantime, do make sure you're checking us out on YouTube. Make sure you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform. And make sure you are right back here next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Until then, have a blessed week.